Yeah, go to Scott. Yeah. Do we need to move anything before Scott makes his presentation? I don't think so. Maybe. We already have the motion on that's on the floor.
Yeah, the amendment is on the floor.
Right.
This is the first one.
Right.
That will handle. So
Okay.
This was moved by.
I'll just say we're moving into bylaws. And Scott has the floor. We're dealing with item 10.
Right, and then this
Okay.
one is ring, and then this be a separate motion required afterwards.
What was that? Sorry.
This is, this bylaw is a separate thing, so it's.
Oh, right, yeah, of course, yeah. Okay. We're good. Thank you very much. It's now 11:56 and we are in open session once again, and I would just indicate that we dealt only with the items indicated in the agenda and nothing else. So we are now, council, dealing with item number 10. And Scott, I believe that I can turn the floor over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Warden and members of council. I just had some additional information to present to you today on the topic of the future secondary plan areas and the on-farm diversified uses based on the level of discussion we've had around this table and some of the questions we've heard from community members and farmers in that regard. I realize I'm between you and lunch again, but it's a familiar position for me. So. Okay, so what we have before us is just a bit of a history lesson. This isn't a spot the differences, but if you look at the map on the left-hand side, you'll see what was reached through the settlement of OPA 80. And when I say the settlement of OPA 80, official plan amendment number 80 was the 5-year review of the county's official plan. That was adopted by County Council in 2009. It was approved by the province of Ontario in 2011. And upon that approval, it was appealed by the town of Hanover and some other bodies. With respect to the town's appeal, it was specifically around their long-term growth prospects. And so as part of the settlement between the county and between the town that was approved by the Ontario Municipal Board, this hatched area that you see kind of on the eastern end of Hanover was included. And so that was the first time, to my knowledge, in the county official plan, we had a future secondary plan area. That came as a result of minutes of settlement. It wasn't included in earlier iterations of official plan amendment number 80 that were before the public. It came as part of the resolve of that appeal. But the certainty that came with that future secondary plan area was to suggest that any further development or redesignation within that identified overlay was going to require additional discussions, it was going to require additional official plan amendments, and it was going to require additional zoning amendments and servicing extensions and everything else. So as we heard from Mr. Longo today, next came official plan amendment number 122. So if we say that OPA 80 was finally approved by the board in 2012, official plan amendment number 122, which Mr. Longo spoke about, was initiated jointly, as he said, by the town of Hanover and the municipality of West Grey in 2013. That was later adopted by council in 2014 and appealed by the Megwood family and approved by the board on a settlement in 2015. But what you'll notice the difference between these two maps is OPA 80 maps this entire area as hatched versus OPA 122 includes this sort of upside down L shape in red there and a separate color hatching. And so that upside down L shape was the secondary plan. So we call this a future secondary plan area, indicating that at some point we might need a secondary plan. And so that secondary plan delved deep into the needs of Hanover and the partnership between the two municipalities to designate most of those lands as highway commercial and to designate a portion of those lands as open space. What you'll see is the remainder of the land stayed in a future secondary plan area. They're not open for growth at this time, but they could be open to a further addition addition to that secondary plan, if you will. And so just to be clear, what you see in both those maps is the brown underneath is the agricultural designation and the white is the rural. And so while we have that future secondary plan area in place, until such time as we have a secondary plan, those underlying designations still apply. So the policies of the agricultural designation and the rural designation still apply. This isn't a settlement area expansion when we're doing one of these future secondary plan areas. It's if you like, flagging a study area that may or may not be needed in whole or in part for future growth. So fast forward to the year 2021, this is what was proposed initially through official plan amendment number 11. So we have what you see in number 1 there is the existing future secondary plan area along with the existing secondary plan, which is that upside down L. And then we have items number 2 and 3, which are the 2 new proposed future secondary plan areas that were originally identified through work that the town of Hanover did with their planning and engineering studies to identify locations for future growth. As we've talked about at earlier meetings, there were some other areas in Brockton identified as future pockets that could be included as well, but we don't have any jurisdiction over those lands within our official plan. So as part of this process, more recently, we've put together a frequently asked questions document, which has been shared with council. And I just want to go through a few of those points just because there still seems to be some questions over them, both in some cases by council, but we also heard some questions even in discussions with staff. So I just want to make this as clear as I can, and certainly happy to take any questions. So the future secondary plan areas were identified right since the inception of OPA 11. So that was November of 2021, which was the first presentation to committee of the whole in that regard. They're not a new addition to official plan amendment number 11. The justification, as Mr. Longo mentioned, and as I've stated a few times, does come from detailed growth work that the town of Hanover did. And one of the things that the town of Hanover was looking at is building off the county's growth projections. Where can we look at future growth that will support the needs of Hanover's long-term growth projections in that regard. Future secondary plan areas are not a settlement area expansion, nor are they a municipal boundary adjustment. In this case, official plan amendment number 11 and the current official plan pass no judgment on those lands in terms of how they would be incorporated into a future settlement area or the municipal jurisdiction of those lands. So everything's still on the table in that regard, from servicing agreements to friendly annexations if the municipalities agreed on that. And of course, that would require provincial approval in that regard. But there's nothing set in stone based on this official plan amendment in that regard. They do identify areas that might be needed for future growth purposes. And for those of you that might be a little longer in the tooth in dealing with county planning in this regard, previous to OPA 80, we actually had a urban fringe designation around Hanover, both to the north and on the southeast side of Hanover. And this was essentially to accomplish the same thing. When we went through the OPA 80 exercise, we removed that urban fringe designation and we went with the future secondary plan area, but they were very similar in their intent in that regard. As I noted, the underlying policies of both the agricultural and rural designations will still apply to these lands. Nobody can come in and apply for a building permit for urban style development in these lands. There will be the need for future official plan amendments, zoning amendments, and servicing expansions prior to any development in those areas. And as part of this, we will be expecting further discussions between all parties, between landowners, between neighboring municipalities, and basically there's still a lot of talking to come on this. Those will be needed as part of those future processes. So on these future secondary plan areas, the county has received comments both in support and in opposition to the mapping in official plan amendment number 11. We've heard from some landowners that were very much in support of it. We've heard from some landowners that were very much against it. We've heard from municipalities on either side of the perspective as well. We did have a very productive meeting earlier this week on a staff-to-staff level with staff from the county, the municipality of West Grey, and the town of Hanover, and we discussed some next steps here and discussed, how we can collaboratively all work together to seek solutions on this. So very thankful to the staff from the town of Hanover and the municipality of West Grey for their willingness and frankness at the meeting in terms of seeking solutions. In addition to our deputation today from Mr. Longo and the correspondence we heard from Mr. Longo and CAO Laura Johnson at the last meeting, we've also received further further correspondence from Denise Baker, who represents Magwood Family Farms. Ms. Baker, through her letter, has noted that some of the Magwood lands are impacted by Official Plan Amendment number 11, and they are fundamentally opposed to the future secondary plan areas in Official Plan Amendment number 11. Ms. Baker further notes that she and her client support the approach of Mr. Longo and the municipality of West Grey, that the future secondary plan areas are not appropriate in Official Plan Amendment number 11, and would request, similar to West Grey, that items 7 and 47 be deleted in that regard. And so the other topic that we've heard lots of discussion on as part of Official Plan Amendment number 11 recently is the on-farm diversified uses. And I apologize, this might be a bit of a retread for those of you that attended or have watched the Agricultural Advisory Committee. But based on the level of questioning in the community, I thought it was worthwhile just going through a few of these slides again. So in our agricultural areas and rural areas and special agricultural areas across the county, we have 3 categories of permitted uses. We have agricultural uses, which is the farming itself, so the growing of crops, the raising of livestock, places to store your tractor or machinery, things like that. We have agricultural related uses, which would be sort of, if you like, in many cases, on-farm processing. So if you had a grain elevator or something like that, or drying operation, that would be the ag-related uses. And then we have the on-farm diversified uses, which you'll hear the acronym a lot, the OFDUs. And so the provincial policy statement provides a definition of what an OFDU is. It notes very clearly that it has to be secondary to the principal agricultural use of the property and limited in area. So you can't take up the whole farm with your secondary use. And it also gives a series of examples that are examples, but not limited to, including home industries, home occupations, agritourism, uses that provide value-added products. Also some specific provisions around ground-mounted solar. The province in 2016 issued a specific provincial guideline on how to implement the PPS in this regard. And so that was a guideline on permitted uses in Ontario's prime agricultural areas. And it gives very clear guidance to municipalities and counties on how we might look at implementing some of these tools. And I just want to pause on this just for a second, because I want to make it very clear that a lot of the discussion we've heard in the community has been with respect to these on-farm industries and some of the on-farm shops that we see very common in parts of Southern Grey County. But OFDUs as a whole are a much broader scale of uses. And I just don't want that to be lost, that when we're talking about OFDUs, we're not just talking about the on-farm industry. We're talking about this whole suite of uses that gives the farm community a diversified source of income in that regard. So with respect to that guideline, as I said, the province provides very clear examples on what you might look at in terms of permitted uses and how you might look at limiting the area and making sure they're secondary to the farm. And so they provide a variety of examples. This map and chart are this picture and chart are directly from the guideline. This is how you might implement it on a smaller farm. So in this case, a 15-hectare farm, which is exactly one of the areas that Official Plan Amendment number 11 is looking at in that regard. You can see you have the existing house there. You have somebody that's looking at repurposing a barn to an antique shop, and then you actually have the productive cropland in behind. And so they have calculations that they set out in there for how you determine the size of the use. And I will say the size of the use is the total size, not just the size of the building. So we need to factor in things like parking or any outdoor storage areas or anything else in that regard. So this is an example of what it might look like on a small 15-hectare farm. They give an example of what it looks like on a 50-hectare farm. In this case, the proposed use is a new fabrication plant. What you can see in the little bubble that zoomed in there is you have the building itself, you have some parking, you have an extension of the farm laneway, and then you also have the outdoor storage area. You can see some rows of trees there that presumably are acting as a buffer to screen the use both from a visual and perhaps from other perspectives as well. In this case, on a 50-hectare farm, you get a lot more total use size than you would on a 15-hectare farm because the scale of the use is relative to the size of the overall farm. So what's being proposed here in terms of the size of the building is 1,500 square meters. Then you have 200 square meters of outdoor storage, 150 square meters of parking, and so on and so on. So you calculate the total use of the non-farm, on-farm diversified use, if you will. And so the county official plan currently allows for these OFDUs across our agricultural, special agricultural, and rural designations. We provide for a whole suite of uses similar to what's in the provincial policy statement: home occupations, the home industries, things like a vet clinic. You could have a cidery or brewery or distillery in that regard. Agritourism uses like bed and breakfast, petting zoos, corn mazes, seasonal events, things like that, or small scale retail uses like a farm market, a tack shop, a small cafe or restaurant. So those are already permitted in the county official plan, and that list, generally speaking, isn't changing in official plan amendment number 11, other than we're deleting campgrounds as a permitted use in that regard. So in terms of the proposed changes in official plan amendment number 11, we are looking at proposing slightly smaller farm sizes for the agricultural and special agricultural designations. Currently on the agricultural designation, the minimum farm size is 20 hectares. In this case, we're proposing 10 hectares. In the special agricultural designation, the minimum farm size currently is 10 hectares of agriculturally productive area. In OPA 11, we're looking at just a flat 10 hectares rather than relating it back to the agriculturally productive area. The changes in rural are less significant because in the rural designation, we already permit OFDUs relative to the farm size on all size of properties because they have a little bit more flexibility than our prime ag areas in that regard. OPA 11 is looking at clarifying the fact that some of these OFDUs can have impacts. So they could have traffic impacts, noise impacts, servicing impacts. And so in some cases, it's not just a matter of you pay your application fee and submit your application and get your approval. In some cases, there's justification to be done. You got to look at some of these technical studies, and they would have to be submitted with your applications. So that's already a practice we engage in, but we're just trying to make that 100% clear in OPA 11. So there's no surprises to either future applicants or neighbors or municipalities that these studies are a very real part of some of these on-farm diversified use applications. As I noted earlier, we're also looking at removing campgrounds as a permitted use. They would still be permitted in the rural designation, but not in the prime or in the agricultural or special agricultural. One of the things that we've always struggled with as staff is determining how an OFDU is secondary to the active farm operation. And it's easy to determine the secondary nature based on size. So we can say it's no more than 2% of the farm, and that's very clear. But as council will be aware, we can't force anyone to farm. And so anyone at any time can buy or sell farmland and choose not to cultivate crops or raise livestock. And so the best method we've come up with to test whether or not it is actually an active farm is, does the owner have a farm business registration number? We've certainly heard criticism of this in the community. There's the note that a farm business registration number is a fairly low bar to meet in terms of demonstrating farm income. We've also noted that that farm business registration number is a one-time test. At any point, somebody could have an OFDU, show their farm business registration number, and then sell the property, and that next owner of the property could choose not to farm the lands and not have a farm business registration number. That said, this is what we've seen through the research as the best tool available to try to, again, get to that point of making sure that these are farms first and OFDU second, and not just a rural property with an OFDU on it. In this case, we're also providing a slight incentive for those that want to reuse an existing farm building versus constructing a new one. So you get a slight discount in your size, similar to that example we saw earlier with the antique shop. This comes in part from direction from the Agricultural Advisory Committee that there's a desire to preserve old barns across the county. So this is the comparison of the old versus the new in pre-OPA 11 and post-OPA 11, if you will. So if you look at the top chart, that's the pre-OPA 11. So what you see is the total size of the on-farm diversified use. That would include the building, the outdoor storage, the parking, the laneway, everything else. And then the total size of the building can be no more than 20% of that total size of the use. So what you'll see between the two tables is 20 hectares, 30 hectares, 40 hectares, absolutely no change. Those aren't changing through official plan amendment number 11. They're already permitted in the county plan. There's no changes there. Where you do see the change in the agricultural designation is on the low end of the spectrum. So on the low end of the spectrum, if you have a 10 hectare farm, you would now be eligible for a 2,000 square meter OFDU and a 400 square meter building size. And on the higher end of the spectrum, at a 50 hectare plus farm, you could have up to a hectare or 10,000 square meters of OFDU size and up to 2,000 square meters of building size. I will say that is the absolute cap. It cannot go any higher than that based on provincial policy and the county's proposed policies in that regard. And so we have received a significant number of comments on this fairly recently. We hadn't really received any other than a request for these changes when we first presented the staff report to Committee of the Whole on September 8th. But there's been lots of discussion in the community, which is great. And we had a meeting this past Friday with our Agricultural Advisory Committee. And so you will see on the Committee of the Whole meeting today, there is the minutes from that meeting, as well as a piece of correspondence that was submitted by Agricultural Services, who had talked to a number of farmers in this regard. And so I'll just go through some of these. There was concerns about the lack of consultation with the farm community and farm commodity groups. There was concerns about the impacts of OFDUs on neighbors, things like noise, emissions, traffic, pollution, concerns about the cumulative impact. So if we're only ever dealing with one on-farm industry or on-farm business at a time, it might be tenable, but once you start having a whole series on a single road or in a single area, there might be cumulative impacts. There was concerns about the climate change impacts of having these types of uses spread across the countryside. Concerns about the impact on local infrastructure. Primarily, that was based on some of our rural road networks and could they handle the traffic that's associated. Concerns about the total size of the OFDUs and whether or not that size should be permitted on a smaller farm. There was questions about how we demonstrate that the OFDUs are in fact secondary to the farm. Again, as I said earlier, there was questions about the farm business registration number, many suggesting that that's not a good metric. We heard concerns about the loss of productive agricultural land, concerns about the fact that allowing for these on-farm businesses has the unintended side effect of increasing the price of farmland. So if a farmer was looking to buy a property and they solely wanted to farm, they didn't want a secondary source of income on that farm, they're competing against someone that might be factoring into their business decision the fact that they could have a business there. And so maybe that person that could have the business is willing to pay more for the farm than the farmer who literally just wants to work the land kind of thing. There was concern about whether or not some of the industrial OFDUs should be located in industrial parks. There was concerns about some of the individual operations and is health and safety and monitoring being enforced within these on-farm shops. Some thought the permissions overall were too broad and too permissive. On the other end of the spectrum, we heard some positive comments. We heard people say that there's been farmland in Southgate that's been drastically improved as a result of the OFDUs, and the farms have been cleaned up as a result. We've heard that farmers in general, and this is probably no surprise, prefer planters just to stay out of their way, and they prefer a green tape approach versus a red tape approach. And then we've also heard others that were supportive of OFDUs as a diversified income source for farmers. And one of the things that we talked about at our Ag Advisory Committee meeting this past Friday was the fact that most farms in Ontario aren't supported solely by farm income. They would have another income source. In some cases, that might be one member of the family that's going into town and working in a school or hospital or wherever. In other cases, that might be having an on-farm business. But the days of farms that are solely self-supporting based on the farm income are becoming fewer and more far between in that regard. With respect to the rationale, so why have county staff proposed this? Why are we doing this? As I said, the requirement for the farm business registration number was really trying to address a gap in the current policy in that we don't have any tests to meet, so to speak, on how you're secondary to the principal agricultural use of the property. In theory, someone could buy a 100-acre farm, they could install an OFDU and have no intent of ever farming the 100 acres, or they could choose to lease out that acreage. We acknowledge the flaws in this. This is a point-in-time requirement. Land use permissions rest with the land, not the landowner. So if something changes in the farmer scenario, or if they choose to sell the land, then they can still continue to operate the OFDU. This is a challenging one from a planning perspective, because I can't think of any other example where we would tell a potential business owner that you need to meet this bar before you can open your business or before you can continue to operate your business, other than we would have our zoning. I want to be clear that being secondary to the farm is not a measurement of income levels or the farm income versus the OFDU income. We've heard these comments from the public. Quite frankly, what a farm is grossing from their farm versus what a farm is grossing from their OFDU is none of my business, and nothing I can base a policy recommendation on in that regard, or county planning staff in that regard. One of the other things to note is that that policy around discounting and reusing existing buildings is directly from the provincial guidelines in that regard. There was the justification that recognizing these smaller acreages and giving farmers a secondary source of income on them might have the benefit of preventing some of these smaller acreages from being bought up for estate purposes and taken out of production. There's no certainty there, but if farmers know that they can diversify their income there, it might be a positive side effect in that regard. As we heard on the other end of the spectrum, there were some concerns that farmers were being priced out of farmland because people could factor in the business into their business decisions in that regard. And finally, the requirement for technical studies was to recognize the fact that some of these uses, and not just the on-farm shops, do have impacts from a noise trafficking service. Particularly some of those uses, if you were ever to consider like a wedding barn approach where somebody might be having a wedding, there would certainly be noise and traffic impacts and noise going to all hours of the night. So there's a number of reasons why an OFDU might require some of these studies. With respect to some other policy considerations, county staff want to flag the fact that the county official plan sets the broad policy. We have the broad policy in there now, and the municipalities can choose to be more restrictive than the county plans in their own municipal official plans and zoning bylaws in that regard. So we do have examples across the county right now where a municipality has chosen to be more restrictive. Grey Highlands, for example, only allows for smaller OFDUs, and that's well within their realm. One of the other tools that we wanted to flag is site plan control can be used to further control these on-farm industries or other on-farm diversified uses. It could look at things like fencing or buffering or landscaping, the aesthetics, where the parking is located, where the OFDU is located in relation to neighbors or in relation to the current barn or homestead in that regard. So it is a valuable tool outside of the official plan and zoning that a number of our municipalities utilize in that regard. The impact on infrastructure is always a tough one, especially when we're looking at a lot of these on-farm diversified uses as a one-off basis. Municipalities can choose to collect development charges on some of the buildings that might be proposed on site. So if you did have an on-farm diversified use and you had development charges that required collection on industrial buildings, then you could collect development charges and help pay for some of that infrastructure. But that is a challenging one. Some of the other concerns cited with respect to workplace health and safety and enforcement, simply put, it's not something we can control in the official plan. If somebody builds a industry, whether it's on a farm or whether it's in a industrial park, how compliant they are with workplace health and safety practices is not something we can know at the county level at the application basis, and it's not something we can base our opinions on in that regard. One of the other concerns that we heard at the Agricultural Advisory Committee was concerns that maybe an enterprising individual would get an approval for an on-farm diversified use and then come back 6 months later and try to sever it and sever, if you like, the business from the farmland. Simply put, in the agricultural designation and the special agricultural designation, this isn't permitted. It's not permitted at the provincial level, it's not permitted at the county level, and it wouldn't be permitted at the local level. So if someone did want to explore that, the staff recommendation, at least based on the current policy regime, would be recommending refusal in that regard. One of the other things I'd just like to flag is there is current policy in the county official plan that sets out tests when we're looking at these OFDUs, tests revolving around compatibility with surrounding uses. Can the use be sustained by local servicing and infrastructure levels? Have all building code requirements been met? And that building code requirement one is a big one, particularly when someone is looking to reuse a farm structure. So if we had a bank barn that was built in 1910 and now in 2022 they want to turn it into a wedding facility, the building code behind a farm building in 1910 is quite different than an assembly hall in 2022. So that's a very important one. We do require that the scale is secondary to the farm. As we saw in that earlier chart, you can be no more than 1 hectare. And even then, that's only on a very large farm. On smaller farms, it's scaled back significantly. They need to demonstrate that they have appropriate parking, and they need to demonstrate that they're, if it is an industrial style use, that they're compliant with the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks D6 guidelines, which separate industrial uses from nearby dwellings in that regard. With respect to just sort of some closing remarks, I will say that if there is a desire from council to separate either of these items, either the future secondary plan areas or the on-farm diversified uses, they could come back forward to this council as separate official plan amendments in this regard, separate and distinct from official plan amendment number 11. But currently the staff report that's been received by committee of the whole is recommending the approval of the entirety of official plan amendment number 11. And so with that, I'll stop now and answer any questions if there are any.
You moved very quickly, Scott. You must be serious about our lunch. Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, County Council, and great report, Scott. I don't know if there's anything you missed. You pretty much captured it all, and thank you for doing that. The one question I do have is you talk about ag lands and smaller properties, but there are certain municipalities that do have rural lands that could be severed. And that's where some of the conversations came from, in the sense of rural severance policies are different than ag lands, and you could create smaller parcels. I don't know if you want to speak to that or not.
Through you, Mr. Warden. Thank you for your question, Deputy Warden McQueen. You are right. So in the agricultural and special agricultural designations, there would be no permission for severances there. In the rural designation, there could be severances. If someone built an on-farm diversified use and severed it after the fact, it would, in my opinion, shoot them in the foot for ever having future expansions, because it's relative to the size of the property. So if they severed off a 2-acre property for the purpose of the OFDU, they could never look at expansions in that regard. But that is a possibility. In terms of how frequently we've seen that over the years, I can only think of 2 examples where we've had someone come in after the fact and apply for the severance of an on-farm diversified use in the rural designation. I will say, just to be 100% clear, the province does allow for the severance of an ag-related use. And so we have seen that at times where it was a grain drying operation or an abattoir, but they don't allow for the severance of the on-farm diversified uses, except in the rural designation, as Deputy Warden McQueen has duly pointed out.
Go ahead.
Just to follow up to that. So yeah, under the rural policies, I think the smallest you can be is 20 hectares or 50 acres. And then a residential lot is 2 acres or thereabouts, right? That's a policy for rural. But I know some of the concern was you could take 40 hectares and split them all in half. You could create a lot more 20 hectare areas, and then you could create. And I guess that could happen today as well, I presume.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. So the county policies on rural severances in this regard are fairly permissive. We say the minimum size for a lot is 2 acres, but or 0.8 hectares. But beyond that, you can create a hobby farm size lot, or you can create a farm size lot or larger. So that can happen today, and we do see pressure for rural severances today. In my experience, it hasn't been necessarily around these on-farm diversified uses, but in theory, somebody could take a 100-acre farm. If there'd been no previous severances, they could sever it a few times, and if the properties were large enough, could put an on-farm diversified use on each of those. In the ag designation and the special ag designation, if there was an existing lot out there that was under the farm size, they might be able to put an on-farm diversified use, but they couldn't create those lots anew. Whereas, as you pointed out, they could potentially in the rural designation.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And I'm just seeking procedural advice at this time or guidance to deal with the amendment that I put forward at the last meeting to deal with the removal of section 7 and 47. I'm wondering if it is at this time that I could bring this forward.
Thank you. This is the appropriate time. We had a presentation from staff. I just want to make sure that any questions with respect to Scott's presentation are dealt with, and we are absolutely now dealing with your motion. So are there further questions, Councillor Desai?
Thank you, Warden Hicks. My question is regarding the on-farm diversified. The first question is, would an operation such as a winery or a cheese factory, wherever cheese is made, I know the French word is fromagerie. I don't know the English word. Okay, I'm sorry. I guess I've been watching too much Big Bang Theory. Anyways, would a winery be considered an on-farm diversified use, or would it be commercial or industrial? And I ask this because I'll make further comments once I have the answer to this.
Through you, Mr. Warden, like a lot of things in planning, there's not a real straightforward answer to that. But a winery typically spans all three of the uses. So the growing of the grapes would clearly be an agricultural use, and any storing of any equipment that's used for the production of those grapes or the harvest of those grapes, that's agricultural. Some of the on-farm processing related to the grapes, so the pressing of the grapes, even the manufacturing of the wine, would be what's called an agricultural related use. And the province is 100% clear that agricultural related uses shall have no restrictions on their size or scale. And then some of the more if you like, consumer-oriented aspects of the winery. So if you had a small tasting room, or if you had a small cafe or something else, or some outdoor scenic viewing areas, those would be the on-farm diversified use. So when we're dealing with wineries and cideries, we're really trying to put each of the different components in a bucket. But the only sort of calculation we need to do is the size of the bucket for the OFDU, not the size of the bucket for the farm uses or the ag-related uses in that regard.
Go ahead.
Scott, maybe just one more piece of clarity. The zoning and the designation is one piece. The MPAC classification of the property is then something different. If you want to, I just heard the word industrial there, and I thought maybe we want to.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. That's a great point. This was another discussion at the Ag Advisory Committee this past week. So we've done some investigations into these uses after they've been established in the past, and in looking at a farm that has an on-farm diversified use on it, we can see three different sort of tax classes, if you will, on that same farm. So the farmland is still assessed at a farmland rate. The house would be assessed at a residential rate, and the on-farm business would be assessed, if it was an on-farm industry, at an industrial rate. And so in the past, we have had questions about whether or not people are choosing to locate these industries on a farm as if you like a tax dodge, but that's not the case. As soon as MPAC is aware of it, then that business gets assessed at an industrial rate if it is an industrial business. Thanks for raising that, Kim.
So my follow-up question here, Warden Hicks, is for a winery or a cidery or any such business as that, do we require them to do traffic studies or studies along those lines? And the reason I ask this question is in Grey Highlands, we've heard from our constituents that having on-farm diversified uses has led to an increase in transport trucks or transport trailers going down several gravel roads as well as paved roads. As municipalities, and this is objective data, this is not me speculating, we do not raise enough revenue, whether it be through taxation or development charges, to account for the degradation of the infrastructure assets that is caused by this heavier load of traffic. And when talking to someone else on this topic and voicing my opposition, it did come up that, farm vehicles are different today than they were when the road was maybe put down. However, the farm has existed for ages, whereas right now we're able to control the size of an on-farm diversified use. And so opening that up, are we as a municipality going to raise those revenues through taxation or development charges, something that has historically proven to be an unpopular decision? Are we going to do that, or are we allowing further degradation of our infrastructure assets? The other point to this as well is with regards to traffic safety. We do have a shortage of enforcement in our communities, and I don't know if this is unique to Grey Highlands or if this is across Grey County municipalities. And I'm not blaming anyone for this. However, by increasing the size of the allowed on-farm diversified, and thereby increasing the amount of traffic that can go to these properties along these roads, which are not necessarily in the best shape to start with, are we creating safety concerns for people who live on that road and use that road regularly? So those are my concerns with regards to the on-farm diversified and increasing the size that we allow. It does increase the traffic that would go to the property, and the safety concerns around it, I think, is something we should consider as well. Thank you, Warden Hicks.
Well, thank you for that. And I believe, Scott, you mentioned that lower tier municipalities can put more restrictive measures in place. Is that part of the answer?
Yeah, you're correct there, Mr. Warden. They can put more restrictions in place. With respect to Councillor Desai's question about, our on-farm diversified uses treated the same as, say, wineries when it comes to traffic studies. Anytime we have a planning application at the municipal or county level, typically it starts with a phone call or a pre-submission consultation meeting to say, hey, listen, if I'm going to do this, what's required of me? In some cases, that would just be, well, you just submit your application fee and we'll see if council approves it. In other cases, it would be, we need to see these studies. In determining whether or not we need to see things like a traffic study or a servicing study, county staff and municipal staff would look at the scale of the operation. And so certainly if it was a large winery that was drawing in lots of people, especially tourists and everything else, there could very well be the need for a traffic study versus if it was, somebody, making bottles enough for themselves and a few friends, then probably not. And that answer is the same for on-farm diversified uses. There certainly have been some in the past where we required things like traffic studies, and there was others where the thought was based on the scale of the use, it's not needed. And the warden is 100% correct. Municipalities can choose to be more restrictive there. We've heard from the province in the past, a municipality cannot ban on-farm diversified uses, but if you want to set a smaller cap or if you want to impose more study restrictions, then you certainly can. With respect to your comments about the financial impacts and the impacts on infrastructure, that's a challenging one. And that's something that we've struggled with over the years, not just with on-farm diversified uses, but other things like gravel pits and various other operations that we see across the countryside that are putting heavy vehicles on rural roads. And we do have a few tools at our disposal in terms of development charges for on-farm diversified uses or these traffic studies. But as to whether or not they're recouping the total impact on the infrastructure, I'm not sure. The only other thing I'd mention though is the on-farm diversified uses do have a purpose in supporting agricultural viability and also in some cases even providing non-farm employment. So we have a number of these on-farm diversified uses that are not only operated by the farmer, but they provide jobs to others in the area.
Thank you. This will be my last follow-up, I think, mainly because I got Scott to give me a clear answer on planning. So will the member across stop heckling? Good Lord. So I understand from what Scott is saying that a retail establishment or a tasting bar at a winery or a cidery would be an on-farm diversified use. So if we choose at this point not to allow the increased size, the question is that there are some municipalities in Grey County that are more touristic, if you will. I really struggle now because I can't say anything bad about Southgate. That are a bit more tourism oriented. Are we then, if by not allowing on-farm diversified on smaller properties, are we hamstringing the tourism aspect, something that as a county we've talked about quite a bit, we've promoted quite a bit? Is that something we're doing? And second question, and I'm really sorry, Scott, but I'm going to have to use the gray area of planning. Are we in a position where we can look at the fact that tourism is in fact a priority for this council and this governing body? Can we look at special provisions for tourism related on-farm diversified uses to allow those businesses more leeway as opposed to more industrial operations?
So thank you for your questions, Councillor Desai. With respect to, the difference between an on-farm industry versus an on-farm tourist operation, it's interesting. One of the representatives from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture that spoke at the meeting on Friday spoke to the fact that in many municipalities, it's those on-farm tourist organizations that are on-farm tourism operations that are generating the most amount of conflict in the neighborhood. It's the ones that are playing loud music or having large volumes of cars or various other things causing the concern. In many other municipalities, it's not the on-farm industries. There's certainly room for a municipality to explore different provisions for different types of uses. If it was something that council was looking for, I would suggest it would be a rewrite and might be a separate OPA process versus something that we could quickly edit into official plan amendment number 11. The one other sort of caution there is you would need rationale, or we would need rationale at the county level or at the municipal level on why we're supporting one on a smaller operation versus not another. And we could be taken to task to say, well, listen, you allow for my friend here, but you don't allow for me, kind of thing. So we would need to very clearly draw out, what would be allowing where and why in case of challenge.
Thank you. I've been watching Randy's head. If you look at him, he's really into this. I know he has lots to say. Councillor Mackey, I think you're next.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Scott, reading through the Agriculture Advisory Committee meeting or minutes and some of the correspondence that were received in the delegations from our agricultural community, most of them were asking for further consultation, wanting to reach out to other commodity groups and other agricultural industries. Do you believe that proper due diligence or notice has been given? I guess I have some concern that we developed the Agriculture Advisory Committee. They are recommending to us that we look further into this around the on-farm diversified. I have some concern that we not follow that advice and make sure we have wholehearted input from our eggs or all of our agricultural sectors and services without moving ahead with the development of the on-farm diversified.
Through you, Mr. Warden. Thank you for that question, Councillor Mackey. With respect to meeting the requirements of the Planning Act, we have met those requirements. We have exceeded those requirements. Could we do more consultation? There's always room for more consultation. I will say, with respect to the feedback we've heard to date, as council is well aware through discussions at the Euro Municipal table, we're much more likely to hear from those that have concern than we are from those that are ambivalent or those that support. We don't usually get many letters of support in that regard. So the fact that we've heard more concerns than we have support isn't totally alarming to me. But if there is a thought amongst council that we need to put a pause on this and maybe look at it at a future date or maybe leave the current status quo right now, we could certainly pull this out of official plan amendment number 11 and revisit it at another time or not revisit it as council sees fit.
So Michael and Scott, both of you have mentioned that there could be a couple of sections removed. And then that would be a new official plan amendment. How onerous is that going to be on all the planning staff to go through if 2 or 3 items on farm diversified, for example, was removed and we get further comment from that sector? How onerous is it bringing back that specific item?
Through you, Mr. Warden. We have looked at the sections of official plan amendment number 11 as they apply to both the future secondary plan areas and the on-farm diversified uses. We have a total of 6 sections that if council saw fit to direct staff to remove them, we could remove them. And so if it's a simple delete, then that's easy to do, and we could address that through the bylaw today. If it's something along the lines of wanting to edit or wanting to further modify sections, then I believe the advice we have given to us is that we defer the matter today, and the final bylaw would have to come back to council at a different day. But certainly we have prepared sections of OPA 11 that could be deleted on either the future secondary plan area or the OFDU basis, or both, if that was council's direction.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. I think with regard to specifically the on-farm diversified uses, as Scott said, that there's not a particular sense of urgency around that. We have existing policies in place, and I think those have been working well. I think what we would do is perhaps look at a future time where it was appropriate to bring this together. I don't, unless somebody brought forward information to the contrary, I would suggest that we would leave that until such time as we had perhaps a broader basket of other changes that we were looking to go through again, and we would undertake the consultation on this as part of another exercise in the future. And for the very point that you raised with regard to the staff workload and just ensuring that we were doing a full job. So that's what I would suggest at this time. If you decide that you want to remove that, we remove it, we set it aside for now, and we revisit that at a future time when we've had a conversation with folks about it being appropriate to do so, and in light of other work that might be going forward at the same time that might relate to it as well.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands, so we've dealt with Scott's presentation. Oh, Deputy Warden.
So do we propose then to make amendments then to what's ahead of us? Because I certainly would support removing the OFDUs from OPA 11 for as a discussion for today. And if that needs a motion, then I would move that, Mr. Warden.
So just one quick second. That would be a secondary amendment. We deal with it. So we deal with the secondary first, right?
So what we have in the next.
Right.
Options are sales, which just deals with the future. They could also do another amendment.
Right. Right. And then we deal with that first.
And then do it that first,
Right.
and that would be added to the amendment that was passed, and then back to the original.
Okay. Thank you for your indulgence. I was just seeking clarification on the process. So my understanding of the process is that you can bring a motion with an amendment. It would be, you read in the package, number 2 says primary amendment. So it would be a secondary amendment. The secondary amendment would be dealt with first, and then we would go back to the primary amendment, and then you're right.
And it would be
So now that you know the process, you're at will to decide if you want to bring a motion to remove the on-farm diversified uses. If you do, and it receives a seconder, then we'll move into debate on that. Once that's finished, we'll go back to Councillor Robinson's motion.
And then if that were to happen, those two items considered
Right.
together.
Oh, I see. Got it. So the clerk is suggesting that if the on-farm diversified uses motion were brought, seconded, and proceeds, it would then be combined with Councillor Robinson's motion. If it proceeds. Yes, go ahead. Could I ask you to use your microphone, please?
There's two items that we're talking about today. One is what Wes Gray is speaking with regards to Councillor Robinson, and secondly is the OFDUs. I don't understand why you would roll them together, because one may have different context than the others. What I'm saying is if the Councillor Robinson was to go first, then I think that should go first, and then the OFDUs should go as a second, because I think there's two different debates. And my point is having them rolled up in one, sometimes, you know, in your local councils, you may say, I wish to split the question. So I'm suggesting that it's separate to start with, so then it's not confusing in the sense one may be supporting one, but not supporting the other. So that's where I would more like to lead to is if Councillor Robinson was to go first, we'll deal with that one. And then I'll just to put me in the hold, then I would deal with the OFD as a second amendment to the secondary part of that.
Okay, so I'm trying to set out options for you. Certainly, we have the option to deal with them separately, but if you bring the motion to deal with the on-farm designated use, that would be dealt with first. And then we would go to Councillor Robinson's to deal with them separately, if that's your wish. Is that clear enough? Go ahead.
That's fine, just as long as we can have separate votes on the two items. That's as long as that can happen, for sure. So I'll move that.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Just to clarify, we do have an amendment from the past meeting on the floor that was brought forward by Councillor Robinson, and that was to remove sections 7 and 47 specific to the future secondary plan areas. So there's kind of two options here. Council can vote on this primary amendment that was brought forward if you wish to deal with those matters separately, or if there is possibility for a secondary amendment, which would in effect amend the amendment if you wish to add in on-farm diversified uses, but that would have the effect of dealing with those two questions together. So we need to either deal with the primary amendment alone first, or amend that amendment, if that helps.
Councillor McQueen.
I understand what you're saying is you have the first amendment, then you're adding a second amendment. So we vote on the second amendment. If I put it forward, if it carries, then it's rolled into the first one. The only question is then is if the first one is dealt with, it just means the final vote could have one that's conflicting with some members versus the others. And I just think that's problematic in the sense that it might put, but I guess it could be, then could you ask the question, could you split the question? Because that sometimes happens as well.
So once the amendment is voted on, it would go back to the main motion, either as amended or as it originally stood. And it's in order to bring forward a further amendment at that time. Not even to split the question, but to propose a further amendment again.
So I'll move a motion to amend the amendment. No?
So just to be clear, if you do that now, you will essentially do what you don't want to do, which is to combine them, right? So I think what you want to do is you want to allow Councillor Robinson's motion to be dealt with separately and first without bringing an amendment now, and then later bring your amendment. Okay, Councillor Woodbury, oh, you're good? Are we all clear about what's happening? So we are now then dealing with Councillor Robinson's motion, which is already on the floor. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, which is precisely why I asked for the procedural comment early on. So thank you very much. So at this time, I will move my amendment. That is just for the record, I will read it into the record. And that is that proposed bylaw 5145-2022 be amended to remove references to future secondary plan areas in the municipality of West Grey contained in section 7 and 47, and that the topic of future secondary plan areas within the municipality of West Grey be dealt with at a future county council meeting and only after consultation with and between the local tier municipal members and following the appropriate opportunities for public and stakeholder lower tier municipal member input. And that is bylaw 5145-22, just for clarity's sake. And I am putting that back on the floor as I had presented it at our last meeting.
Very good. And just for further clarification, it is therefore then a motion to delete rather than a motion to defer. Okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So for clarity for everyone, go right ahead. Do you wish to speak to it?
I want to confirm a seconder.
The motion is already on the floor.
So I just want to confirm, yeah. Warden, I just wanted to confirm the seconder that was in place at the last meeting. Thank you. So in speaking to the item, County Council, West Grey maintained that the overlays are not a fit for the housekeeping purpose of OPA 11 and warrants its own process. West Grey respectfully requests a separate process for the two overlays is appropriate and required. Doing so affords Hanover and West Grey staff the opportunity to establish a process that would enable both parties to better identify how any lands could and should be identified, developed, and serviced going forward. West Grey has no interest in halting growth in Grey County, and we are and always have been interested in exploring models that benefit West Grey and Grey County overall. West Grey remains committed to actively participating in growth matters. Removing items 7 and 47 from OPA 11 enables appropriate focus to address growth. The balance of OPA 11 amendments are acceptable to West Grey and provide further clarity to all lower tier municipalities. And I would encourage County Council to support the amending motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. And I want to give everyone some background information about what Hanover has been doing. We have completed the necessary work to demonstrate our current challenges relative to residential, commercial, and industrial growth. A step-by-step planning process included a consultation and communication plan. A comprehensive review of all vacant lands within our boundaries has been completed. An official plan amendment has been completed to designate available vacant lands for development. Consultation meetings were initiated with our municipal neighbors at both the county and local levels. Meridian planning consultants met with Grey County and Bruce County planning staff. West Grey growth representatives, former MPP Bill Walker, MPP Lisa Thompson, the Brockton mayor, stakeholders, and developers. And a presentation was made to West Grey Council in April of 2021. A public meeting was held for information sharing and discussion with 57 attendees. West Grey council members were in attendance. At our last meeting, a comment was made that designating future secondary areas is a dangerous precedent. I fail to see where planning for the future is dangerous. It is just good planning to control future growth. A plan for healthy and complete communities proactively addresses infrastructure, road and intersection improvements, pedestrian infrastructure, and capacity for water and wastewater. Planned growth will protect farmland and green spaces, directing development to occur where primary settlement areas have the appropriate levels of service. With regards to setting a precedent, Hanover has by necessity had to move forward in order to ensure our municipality meets the requirements of the provincial policy statement. I also want to say that the future secondary areas have been included in OPA 11 since it was initially presented to County Council in November 2021. This is not being pushed through or jammed through, as comments have been made about it. I ask you, what is the benefit of removing the overlay of the future secondary areas? This designation is meant to highlight areas that are most appropriate for future growth. These lands would require future planning approvals, including an additional county official plan amendment prior to any growth occurring. The lands would also need to be serviced prior to any development occurring. How growth may occur on these lands will be worked out between West Grey and Hanover. The designation will determine where the growth occurs. Respectfully, I do not support removing the future secondary areas from OPA 11. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. Can someone provide some background on this? So as Councillor Patterson just mentioned, the OPA has been in the works since November of 2021. Yet the motion says that this item only be dealt after consultation with and between the local tier municipal members. Has there been no consultation? Or because I think it's inaccurate to suggest that there hasn't been any consultation. If there has been consultation and you just didn't like the result of the consultation. Warden Hicks, you are the Deputy Mayor of Hanover. Can you provide some light on whether or not there has been consultation between the municipal members of the two local tiers?
Thank you. I'll perhaps turn this back to Councillor Patterson, who I think did address the question in her answer, but I'll turn it back to Councillor Patterson.
Great. Oh, thanks. Yes, thank you, Councillor Desai. Yes, we have had consultation and meetings with West Grey, our Meridian planning consultants. As I mentioned, did a presentation to West Grey Council in April 2021. A public meeting was held with our 57 people attending, and West Grey Council members were present. And we have had 2 meetings with West Grey growth representatives along with Hanover's West growth representative. So there has been consultation throughout the entire process of OPA 11.
Sorry, perhaps Scott, did you, I see your hand, but Scott, did you want to add anything about the consultation process for OPA 11 itself?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Warden. So the consultation process through OPA 11 has been as required by the Planning Act. We've circulated it to municipalities. We put notices in the paper and other such things. We have had discussions at the staff level. So we've had local planners meetings where we had town staff in attendance and municipality West Grey staff in attendance. As I said, we had earlier this week a discussion staff to staff, but some of the discussion that I think Councillor Patterson is referring to has been some of the consultation that Hanover has led as part of their processes, and they've been going through a number of processes over the past few years. But with respect to specifically Official Plan Amendment number 11, it's my opinion that we have met the requirements of the Planning Act. No doubt, should the future secondary plan areas be included in Official Plan Amendment number 11, there there's still going to be further consultation to come. There's still going to be that future official plan amendment process, the zoning amendment process, and any servicing extensions if the two municipalities agree to as such.
Well, I'm dealing with you. Are you finished?
I think she wants to respond to me, but I'm happy to share that.
Well, I'll give her an opportunity once you're finished. You finished what you were going to say, yes?
Thank you, Warden Hicks. So in light of that, if there has in fact been consultation, then I would ask that you declare this motion out of order because it is inaccurate. And I don't think I can in good conscience vote either way on this. And so I ask that you declare it out of order.
So I don't believe that the motion is out of order, Councillor Desai. Particularly the section that deals with the removal of sections 7 and 47 are appropriate. In my view, this council has the authority to vote on that issue. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Warden Hicks. In that case, I would ask that I would move an amendment that the second clause be removed entirely from the motion. It does have inaccurate information within it, and I believe I would be within my privilege to request that it be removed. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would just allow me a second to chat with the boss. So that amendment is appropriate if it receives a seconder. So you've moved it. We now need a seconder. If there's no seconder, then we proceed on. Councillor Klumpus, seconds. Okay, so now we will have debate on the motion to remove the second paragraph from the amending clause. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And I know we've been dealing with this with regard to the last meeting and also in this meeting. West Grey has been participating collaboratively with Hanover. There have been a number of meetings, whether it's the subcommittee with appointed members from both West Grey and Hanover in discussion and staff discussion. The reference to the consultation is that we have this OPA 11 amendment that is dealing with an overlay of land within West Grey, and the item is not a housekeeping matter and should be dealt with appropriately and separately in a separate report, having full discussion and also enabling the continuation of discussion between the two municipalities. It is a lower tier responsibility and discussion. Those discussions should remain at the lower tier. West Grey in no way is suggesting that we have not had any consultation. We have, it's ongoing, and we need to continue the discussion at the lower tier in order to facilitate a solution here. And that's why it is worded this way. And I would encourage my county colleagues to support the amendment that is on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam CAO.
Right, okay, there. I would say that when I returned from my time away, when I looked at the text of this amendment, the one thing that did jump out to me was the use of the word appropriate. And I do feel, and I have talked to staff about that in future, I think the intent here was to use the word additional. What we're looking for is additional opportunities for people to have discussions on this, rather than to suggest that the consultation that has taken place, which, as Director Taylor has noted, was entirely what's required under the Planning Act. Appropriate opportunities for consultation have taken place. What you're looking for is additional opportunities for consultation to take place. So that would just be my thought of it.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. And I also want to reference the correspondence from CAO Laura Johnston, the CAO for West Grey, in the September 21st, 2022 correspondence. And it does say that the municipality of West Grey also remains open and ready to advance discussions regarding growth in Grey County. This has been evidence notably in the continuing discussions that have occurred between West Grey and the town of Hanover and West Grey and the municipality of Grey Highlands. Staff have participated in ongoing discussions led by Grey County on various matters related to a collective allocation of appropriate growth in the entire county. And then it goes on to talk about the most recent workshop that took place in June of 2022. So although there have been consultations, we're looking for further or additional consultations in order to address the matter at the lower tiers. So with that, I am seeking the removal of section 7 and 47 within the proposed OPA 11. Thank you.
Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Well, it's obvious that there's two frustrated municipalities. One doesn't believe there's been enough consultation. The other thinks there's been ample. And I think as a county, we need to see both the municipalities. And I'm interested to know what the timeframes might be from West Grey and from Hanover. You know, if we do, you give you more opportunities, how much time is it going to take? Because the longer this takes, the more jobs we're losing in Grey County, not in just West Grey, not in just Hanover, but as a county. There's been lots of opportunities for businesses to come to that area, whether it's in West Grey or whether it's in Hanover, that we're missing out on. And if you live, doesn't matter where you live, you don't care about that municipal boundary, you care about that job being there. So I would urge the two municipalities to get, roll up your sleeves and get to work on this, because we can't wait forever. Bringing it back in, a future date, that's fine. But what would that date look like? That's my question to the two municipalities, because we don't have forever.
I'm going to invite other comments.
Well, that was a question, Mr. Ward.
Go ahead, Councillor Desai.
I believe we are currently debating the amending motion to the primary amendment. I have a similar, I have an identical question, but I figured we'd ask that at the primary amending motion.
And I would agree. Okay, any other questions on the amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, perhaps it's time then to call the question. And just to be clear, the motion is that the second paragraph be deleted. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? And all those opposed? Ooh, what's our count? So it looks like the motion fails. Okay, so we are back now dealing with the amendment in its the primary amendment in its entirety. Okay, is there any further debate on that? And Councillor Mackey, I believe that you want to ask your question as it pertains to the primary amendment. Is that correct?
Yeah, it'd be much quicker this time. Could the members from Hanover and West Grey please give me a timeline on how long future consultations and discussions would take before, a joint application could be brought back to Grey County? Thanks.
And I would just say, although you're asking your question to West Grey and Hanover, it might be appropriate that somebody like Scott weigh in on this, because he has a sense of how long things take in terms of process. But nevertheless, if either West Grey or Hanover wants to answer the question, I'll allow that as well. Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, I can answer that from a general process perspective for an official plan amendment. If a joint official plan amendment was to be submitted by West Gray and Hanover, it would require a similar process that we've taken through OP 11, and that we would need to deem that application complete. We'd have 30 days to do this. So we would then send out a notice of complete application, and hopefully a notice of complete application public meeting at the same time. Schedule the public meeting, have us host that public meeting, and then bring back a final staff report with a recommendation with respect to whatever is being put forward as part of that official plan amendment. It's possible, I guess, as part of that official plan amendment, and this is where, going back to Scott's previous comments in that presentation, there's a distinction between the future secondary plan area and the secondary plan area. So that was the OPA 80 was the future secondary plan area. The secondary plan area was that OPA 122. I'd suspect that if it was a joint application, it would actually be designating lands similar to what was in OPA 122, which again is the next step of this process. So by identifying this overlay as a future secondary plan area, there is a requirement to if there's consideration for any future development growth on those lands, that is dealt with through a separate official plan amendment. And we, like last time, that was a joint application that was submitted by Hanover and West Gray at that time. This, as Scott indicated previously, through OP 11, is just flagging that these are likely the locations where you're going to see that secondary plan process at some point in time in the future. And so all the discussions and all the comments that have been raised through council today in terms of some of the comments, that's to be dealt with through that separate process, which would follow OP 11 and follow the future secondary plan areas. So I just want to make that clear, because there is a distinction between what we suspect would be that joint application coming forward, and that may require a bit longer time frame to go through and review. It requires that comprehensive review work that is identified. It requires essentially addressing all the criteria that's outlined in the policies as it relates to future secondary plan area. And that includes making sure that all the lands, ensuring that enough lands to be actually designated for future growth doesn't exceed the 25-year growth projections. So that's something that will have to be analyzed as part of that review process. So it'll take a little bit longer likely than a standard official plan amendment. A standard official plan amendment, you're looking at least 3 months, 3 to 4 months. That one you're looking at probably 6 months plus.
Is there anybody from Councillor Robinson?
Thanks very much, Mr. Warden. Thank you very much, Councillor Mackey, for the question. It's important that these discussions continue, and certainly West Gray is more than prepared to have the discussions at the lower tier with Hanover. And I just want to quote a couple of things, because it's important to understand that we're in the discussion, we're collaborating, but we need that time to have the discussion at the lower level, not at the county, and certainly with the removal of 7 and 47, that would facilitate what we're asking for. And I quote, Hanover staff acknowledged that West Gray's preference would be to explore beneficial servicing agreements, and all parties agreed to a subsequent workshop, which the county offered to facilitate. West Gray is optimistic and exploring that the model is viable to deal with growth in county, and that's something that we're looking to achieve. Also, by the removal of the 2 sections, it provides opportunity for focused discussion involving the public, stakeholders, and active participation of both municipalities. So to have this amendment pass would certainly facilitate all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Desai first.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. Question of clarity, because planning is such an area. This is step 1. For anything to happen, we would need another official plan amendment. Is that correct?
Scott?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Desai.
So I don't know why we're delaying this further. From all accounts, it seems if we don't make a decision on this today, we're putting it down another year. We have elections in 11 days, not that I'm counting. We could very well likely end up with councils that are obstructionist or hostile. And then what? We're here to try and take step one. We're here as councillors for Grey County. We're not here as the member from Grey Highlands or the member from Southgate, even though we, in jest, we do refer to each other as honorable member from so-and-so, which we should fact check the honorable. Point being, we're here as Grey County councillors, and we need to consider the interest of all of Grey Highlands. It's been a year-long process. Grey County, right? Freudian slip. I lost my train of thought. I'm starting to think this is intentional. We need to consider the interests of all of Grey County, not just one or two municipalities. And this would be the same comment if it was Hanover that was coming here saying we need to delay this. We can't continue delaying such items, especially when for anything to happen on these lands, we would need another long process to see that happening. So I urge this council to vote on OPA 11, including sections 7 and 47 today, to make a decision so that we can move ahead and we can see some growth in Grey County. Because at the end of the day, we're here as councillors for Grey County and not individual municipalities. Thank you, Warden Hicks.
Is it a point of order? Okay, go ahead.
Certainly, Mr. Warden, and I just want to make it abundantly clear that when we sit here as county council, we're here as county council. That is not to be questioned at all. But the item that we're dealing with here is dealing with two of our lower municipalities and the option for additional discussion and collaboration. I think.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you. That's not a point of order. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. I would like to respond to Councillor Mackey. I see West Grey and Hanover coming to the table to discuss growth options at the lower tier level. Once those options are determined, whether it's service agreements or whether it's boundary adjustments, what works for both of us will be the answer that comes to Grey County Council. There will need to be a comprehensive review, feasibility studies for water and wastewater to determine if Hanover has enough services to provide all of that infrastructure, for whether it's in West Grey or in Hanover. So I see that it will take time. It's not just going to happen in 3 months or 6 months. There will be a lot of discussion between the two lower tier municipalities. Once that is worked out, we'll come back to county council and say, we have a joint application or we want to come forward with it. So it's not it's not going to happen in a year, or if it happens in 2 years, I would be very pleased. But this is going to take time, and this is the first step of designating these future secondary areas as potential growth areas. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there Councillor Woodbury?
Thank you. I'm going to go on a slightly different path with some of this. The motion that's before us now, if it was presented in November of last year, I'm looking at the presentation on page 6 of the presentation. It clearly shows the same map that we're looking at as recent. So if it had come before us, this motion 11 months ago, I would have wholeheartedly supported it. I have a problem with letting staff and council and the public go through a process for 11 months and then say, no, we don't want it as part. So I'm not going to be able to support this. To me, I guess maybe pet peeve of mine, but when something's allowed to sit until it's coming down as a bylaw, when it was actually not even in the material, but a presentation before council, the time to stop it was then. And like I say, I wholeheartedly would have stopped it and supported the municipalities handling it on their own. But at this point I can't, so.
Thank you. I know people are getting hungry. So I'm going to perhaps allow you to speak last. And then we'll put it to a vote, or do you have a point of order?
It's not a point of order.
Okay, then I'll come to you last. I'll give you the last say. Councillor Desai, and then I'll go to the deputy warden.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. A couple of references have been made to the lower tiers handling it between themselves. I just want to confirm that this is in fact under the purview of the county, and that the county is not overstepping into something that should be under the purview of the lower tier municipalities. So I just want to confirm, is this something that is wholly within the county's jurisdiction?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Desai. Through you, Mr. Warden. It sort of splits jurisdictions in that regard, because we do have our county official plan, and one of the primary objectives in our county official plan is to make sure that each of our 9 member municipalities are well positioned to accommodate future growth opportunities, whether it be residential or employment or other types of growth. So there's certainly a county interest here, and that's why we've included it in official plan amendment number 11. But there's no doubt the county can't act in a silo here. We need to be working with our partners at the municipality of West Grey and the town of Hanover. And so in my personal opinion, there's room for discussions between Hanover and West Grey specifically, but then there's also room for discussions maybe between Hanover, West Grey, and the county to look at what things might look like at the broad county level, and then what administrative details or agreements might be needed at the municipal level between the 2 municipalities.
And so, thank you for that response. And these discussions would be more appropriate at step 2 or at step 1 at this point, where we're discussing future areas, secondary plan areas. Would it be more appropriate here, or would the administrative discussions be more appropriate when we're actually wanting to do something? And so having this pass and then having targeted discussions around those areas.
Through you, Mr. Warden. I don't know that there's a simple answer to that other than discussions are needed. And from a staff perspective, if both municipalities had gotten together and come to the county and said, hey, listen, we've reached an agreement. Now we want you to consider amending the county official plan. Then, assuming the justification was there, we would have considered doing so. In this case, Hanover had prepared their materials, put forward their justification to the county and to their neighbors, and staff saw fit to recommend it, knowing that we'd have that process for future discussion. So I don't know that there's a more appropriate version versus a less appropriate version. At the end of the day, we all need to be talking and collaborating, and it's staff's opinion that through OPA 11, we haven't closed that door on those discussions, and those future discussions can occur just as they did in the interim period between official plan amendment number 80 in 2012 and official plan amendment number 122, which was 2013 to 2015.
Okay, so Deputy Warden McQueen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. This is more a point of clarity, and going back to what the Madam CEO said, I think that has merit, because I think it's important to recognize that has been discussions, or has been meetings, and I don't know to the mover if that's a friendly amendment or that needs to be changed, but I certainly think that that's something that would recognize some of the past work. I'm encouraged by OPA 122 that it has happened in the past, and going back to what Madam CEO said, I think that has merit. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that, but how it's worded, I think it should of future meetings. And Madam CEO, I forget exactly how you worded it, but if you could repeat that, please.
My suggestion was only that the word appropriate be replaced with the word additional.
Randy.
Just while we're on the topic of potentially friendly amendments to this motion, just based on some of the discussions, I guess, staff would be recommending that to add in the wording in a future official plan amendment, following the wording at a future county council meeting. Yeah, so that just to clarify that would come forward as a future official plan amendment as opposed to deferring and dealing with it at a later date.
Thank you for that. I think that's why at the beginning I made clear that we're dealing with a deleting and not a deferral. Because if we delete it, then the only way it could come back is at a future OPA. All right, I think we've had all the debate. Oh, sorry, Councillor Robinson, I'll give you the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. This issue is representative of a lot of discussion here. So can you imagine the discussion that needs to take place at the lower level? So there's no dispute that discussion has taken place. There's no dispute that further discussion needs to occur. But where I think it's really important is that this is an item that should be addressed separately, not combined in a housekeeping amendment. It is strong enough and it is detailed enough for the lower levels to address that it's separately and then have consideration at county, which is why I have the amending motion before us. So I think it's really important to understand that it's significant enough to have its own staff report, its own consideration. This can happen to any one of our member municipalities here when you're dealing with practically a similar topic. So I just wanted to make that absolutely clear. And I look to my colleagues here to support the amendment that is before you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's finally time for us to call the question. Councillor Burley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. It's time to call a vote and I'm asking for a recorded vote.
Madam Clerk, I'll turn things over to you. Your brief indulgence. Yeah, I think they're trying to make clear, Councillor Mackey, that it would come back if we voted in favor of the amendment, that the item would come back in a separate OPA. And I think that's what the clerk is struggling to capture to make sure that that's abundantly clear. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. I mean, there were changes made up here, and I'm just wondering if the mover and the seconder are in agreement with those, you know, what Randy had mentioned about the future official plan amendment, and then Kim's removal of the word appropriate with additional.
Perhaps I'd better check with the mover and seconder. The question really is about Kim's suggestion with respect to changing appropriate to additional.
Okay.
And secondly, Randy's suggestion that we make clear that if it comes back, it would have to come back not to a future meeting, but by way of a process of a separate OPA.
So the in term of just by way of a question, I'm fine with the first one in terms of additional. I think that just provides additional clarity, quite frankly. But in the process of the OPA, that's not presuming anything at this point. It's just that it permits the additional consultation. And at that time, there would be debate and discussion in terms of whether the new official plan amendment would be addressed. Is that correct?
I think you're absolutely accurate about that. So in other words, just to be clear, if this item, if we voted to approve your motion, it would delete 7 and 47, which essentially means that the only way that these items can come back is by a separate and distinct OPA.
So by way of clarity, by approving this motion, we are deleting section 7 and 47. And then at a future time, this could be considered, which would lend itself opportunity for the lower tiers to have more discussion, and whether that is at the political level or the staff level. And with that clarity, thank you. And I'm fine with the language. And I would also look to my seconder to agree with that and the balance of county council. Thank you.
And the seconder was Councillor Gamble. Are you okay with that? Okay, so now I need to deal with Councillor Clumpus. I see your hand.
Thank you. There we are. Just for clarity, the reason that I seconded the removal of that second clause was that it is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that that is embedded in the process that we've heard today. It's a redundant clause at this point, because that is the process that has been established, not only by precedent, but in the discussions today, that this is exactly what would happen. If this is denied, that would occur in any case. And am I understanding that correctly?
Perhaps not, Councillor Clumpus. If we vote in favor of removing 7 and 47, then 7 and 47 essentially die for now. The only way it could come back is through a separate and distinct OPA. So essentially, you'd be voting to remove 7 and 47 from the OPA 11. And if we want to deal with those issues in the future, we would have to deal with that through a separate OPA. Randy, did you have something to add here?
And so I'm sorry. That if the vote is no, to keep that in to keep those two clauses in the motion before us, then that is the process. That second clause is exactly the process that would occur in any case if those two items were still included in the proposal before us.
Absolutely correct, Councillor Clumpus. Anything to add, Randy? No. Okay. Are we clear now? So we'll turn things over to, oh, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's important for clarity. So I do appreciate any member of county council just seeking clarity in terms of a question. But the process, and I threw you to planning staff, is that the removal of these two sections at this time within OPA 11 that is being considered. This would also allow the time for additional consultation with the lower tiers. And this is the process that would have to occur, that it would be brought back as a separate OPA, correct?
My understanding, Councillor Robinson, is that you're partially correct. There could, if we remove 7 and 47, then they're out of OPA 11. If we want to bring them back, we would bring them back by way of a separate and distinct OPA process, which of course would include dialogue and consultation. I think we're ready for the vote.
Yes.
Okay. Madam Clerk.
So this is a recorded vote on the motion to remove 7 and 47. Councillor Mackey?
No.
Councillor Mackey is opposed. Councillor Gamble?
No.
Councillor Gamble is opposed. Councillor Burley?
Opposed.
Councillor Burley is opposed. Councillor Carlton?
For.
Councillor Carlton is in favor. Councillor McQueen?
For.
Councillor McQueen is in favor. Councillor Desai?
Opposed.
Councillor Desai is opposed. Councillor Patterson?
Opposed.
Councillor Patterson is opposed. Warden Hicks?
Nay.
Warden Hicks is opposed. Councillor Clumpus?
Opposed.
Counselor Clumpus is opposed. Counselor Keaveney. In favor. Counselor Keaveney is in favor. Counselor Body.
Opposed.
Counselor Body is opposed. Counselor O'Leary.
Opposed.
Counselor O'Leary is opposed. Counselor Woodbury. Counselor Woodbury is opposed. Counselor Milne.
Opposed.
Counselor Milne is opposed. Counselor Soever.
In favor.
Counselor Soever is in favor. Counselor Bordignon.
In favor.
Counselor Bordignon is in favor. Counselor Robinson.
In favor.
Counselor Robinson is in favor. Counselor Hutchinson.
In favor.
Counselor Hutchinson is in favor. And that motion was lost 51-39.
Thank you. Okay, so we will now turn to the main motion, OPA 11 as presented. What about? There's no motion with respect to FDUs.
I thought it's in order to go forward now if they wish.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we already did that. Sorry.
No. I'm presuming, Deputy Warden, that you're now going to want to deal with on farm diversified uses. So let me just ask, because I suspect that lunch perhaps has more than arrived. So we could take a break for lunch and come back and deal with the on-farm diversified uses and then the main OPA 11 itself. Yes.
My point of order is, we are in the middle of an item. And I'm just seeking procedural clarity in terms of the fact that we've dealt with one amendment. There's a potential for at least one additional amendment to the main motion. So we're within the item right now. So by having a break within the item, to me, would not be appropriate at this time. Seeking procedural clarity. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion to recess has a higher priority. So we are going to recess, whether you have lunch or use the facilities or whatever. We are going to have a recess. I'm going to suggest that recess be for 40 minutes because I cannot, if I decide to eat, do that in 30 minutes. It's just difficult. So that brings us back at, it's what, 1:40 now. 2:20. So with that said, we're going to recess until, hopefully not. We're going to recess until 2:20 of the clock. Are we clear for the folks online? Excellent. Sorry, hold on. We're not recessed yet. Hold on. Can I get your we're still together. Councillor Robinson has something to raise.
Thank you. So I'm just looking for the procedural section in procedural section of our bylaw that identifies that if you're within a item that the recess takes priority. So I'm just asking for that clarity. Thank you.
Just give us a second and we'll look that up for you. So Councillor Robinson, Within our own bylaws, we're looking at section 22. But Robert's Rules of Order sets out precedent. The highest precedent is to adjourn, secondly to recess, and then other things fall below that. So it's on the basis of that that I'm making the ruling that we can recess. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't-
this is true. It says like the only way, the only time a motion to recess may not go through is when somebody trumps the motion with a motion to adjourn.
Right.
Thank you, that's fine.
So,
Section 21 says motion to recess is not debatable.
right.
We're debating.
No, I think she's simply seeking clarification. Okay, so we are recessed. We'll be back at 20 past.
Thank you.
Thank you. Call everybody back. Thanks, Rob. Okay, so it's now 2:21. We do have our only one of our online is Councillor Bordignon. I guess he'll join us. No, he is there. Okay, so we are now still dealing with OPA 11. Councillor McQueen, I suspect that you have something to say now, right?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Warden and County Council and staff, and thanks for taking the break because we all needed it. So, okay, so yes, with regards to, I'm going to go backwards, 92, 91, 90. There's also 18, 17, and 15. And I was just talking with planner Scott here, and so 90 and 91 and 92 talk about the increase and changes to the off-farm diversity uses. And I was trying to seek clarity on 15, 17, 18, how I was originally talking about it last meeting. 15 and 17 to talk to the chart. And just speaking with Scott, it was that would refer back to the old chart, which is fine. 18 talks about the use of existing buildings, but I maybe would ask through you to Scott, just to add clarity to those points before I formulate my full motion. But the idea is to stick to the current farm diversity uses that are currently and take this one out of the OP 11 at this time. So you do have it up there, okay? But just speaking with Scott, 15 and 17 may be able to be left because they speak to a chart 8, which would revert back to the current allowable that's in our official plan. So 18, I like to leave 18 there, but it does talk about doubling the space, which would change what our what currently allows it. But maybe I'll leave it there for now. And if I got a seconder, I would defer to Scott to sort of add some clarity to 18, and then maybe it would be removed, or if there's a slight tweak. But if I get a second to that, Mr. Warden, then.
Okay, so could I suggest that, because what you mentioned is that you are going to keep what we have. So we're going to go back to our status quo, I suppose. Is that correct? So why doesn't the motion simply reflect that, and that staff be directed to remove all of the clauses that have to do with any changes? And then you don't have to deal with those clauses here. We'll leave it to staff to deal with that. We're simply voting in favor of a status quo. That would be your motion. Of course. Yeah, put your microphone on, please.
With a slight point, I like the idea of 18 because it talks about existing buildings, which talks about our old barns, which is something I think we talk about saving. But I'd like to hear from Scott, because we were just getting into that conversation and you called it the order, and it may not be able to be allowed. So that's my conundrum right at this point. So so I like the motion the way it is right now that you have on there, 18, 90, 91, and 92. But if somebody would second it, I would certainly be willing to make a small amendment to that.
So I get what you're proposing. Why don't we have Scott weigh in on that, and he might have some suggestions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you for raising this, or Deputy Warden McQueen. Sort of, I'm reading the tea leaves of council and some of the concerns we've heard from members of the public. The concerns seem to be some people don't want to see OFDUs on some smaller size properties, and some people don't want to see expanded size permissions for OFDUs. And so I think from a staff perspective, rather than deleting every single, reference to OFDUs in official plan amendment number 11, to address those concerns from the public and concerns from some members of County Council, it's our recommendation that 18, 90, 91, and 92 would be appropriate. Section 15, which Deputy Warden McQueen has referenced, simply removes campgrounds as a permitted use. So to me, that would be in line with some of the public sentiment to say, we don't want anything and everything on a farm. And then 17 is the section that now flags for us that we could request things like noise studies and traffic studies and servicing studies. Again, in my opinion, that would be in line with the public sentiment to say that we need a little bit more control on these uses. Section 18, which Deputy Warden McQueen is referencing, sort of has a dual purpose. On the one hand, it could serve to preserve more barns or more farm buildings, but on the other hand, it could also serve to allow for larger OFDUs where someone is reusing one of those buildings. So if we're truly trying to address some of the public comments received, it might be appropriate to leave 15 and 17 in and take 18, 90, 91, and 92 out. Obviously, staff will take direction from council and happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Scott. So I turn back now to Deputy Warden McQueen. Are you in agreement with that? So the motion would be that sections 18, 90, 91, and 92 be removed. And you'd be seeking a seconder for that, correct? Councillor Mackey seconds. Now we can have discussion and debate if there is any. Any hands? Am I ready to call the question then? Oh, no, I see Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. A couple of things. Just maybe a little bit of perspective from Southgate, our experience with the on-farm diversified uses. Generally, I think the concerns are somewhat overblown. We've had generally good experience with the community's efforts to reconstitute, shall I say, some of the farmland that was not necessarily well used in terms of productive capacity. These smaller shops have allowed a lot of those farms to be farmed productively. They have been cleaned up. The buildings have been either demolished and replaced or fixed up. Certainly, it's been reflected in our tax base, as it was indicated earlier. The industrial taxes do apply to those shops. They don't get any, past jail-free card. One thing that I do recall from years past was there was a debate around new farmers in Grey County, and Grey County was attracting a lot of new farmers, not just farmers from somewhere else, but brand new farmers, because they could afford a smaller piece of land here in Grey County, because by and large, the original survey fabric of our farmland was still in existence here in Grey County. So a lot of the farms were still 100-acre parcels. You go southwest of us here, not too far, and you'll see there are many places where there's 500,000 acres in one farm, one field. 1,000 acres of corn does not build a community. Families on farms create a community. So the more people you have in your community, the better, the stronger that community is. And I think these farm diversified uses support that. The other thing that was talked about earlier was farmland values, and the concern that because these farms were being driven up in cost or value because of the on-farm diversified uses is, in my mind, a red herring. We've been hearing in farm industry, we've been hearing that for years. The supply management industry has an unfair advantage because they have almost a guaranteed income, so they can bid higher. Well, that's baloney. At an auction, it's like going to an auction and saying, well, I didn't get what I wanted because somebody else started bidding. Willing seller, willing buyer. The property is the value that it should be at the end of the auction. The other point I was going to make, and it's the last one, is there was some concern about environmental impacts of some of these shops. Well, 1 hectare, as it was pointed out, is the absolute maximum, as I understood it. Is that correct? Yeah, 1 hectare, which is 10,000 square meters. That's only 2.5 acres. There are many properties in Grey County where they cut more grass than 2.5 acres on their estate home. That, in my mind, is a gross failure of use of productive farmland in Grey County. There's far better uses than cutting grass. And so I would suggest that the work that Scott and Randy have done on this is well-founded, and it's been well received, I would suggest, in Southgate, and I don't think it I don't think it provides any threat to the farming industry in Grey County.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I concur with my member Millen there with regards to what he's saying is absolutely true. And I guess I will say this, that I'm trying to think through you, Mr. Warden, to Scott, when we changed it to the county to 750, and that's allowed across the board. So certainly in Southgate, you can still do the large size anywhere else it's your lower tier that can be more restrictive. We went through a process in 17 of looking at Grey Highlands official plan of looking at, the 750, increasing it. And we ended up staying at the 250 for part of the reason is Grey Highlands is made up of agriculture and rural designation more so, and certain areas of, you're allowed to do them in both, but a lot more conflict in the rural areas and in the agricultural areas. And that's where we ended up getting some of that feedback. The other part I will say is, I think this is something that can come back. It's not saying it's taking it out of here, but it's not saying it can't come back for further discussion. You'll see the minutes of the agricultural advisory meeting, and also the letter that's been referenced from the Ag Services from Lori Smith, who sort of gathered some of those comments. I think it's interesting to note is when those comments were coming in, it's busy farming time and people still have the time to make those comments. So I think certainly going through that process, and we saw it during the green and gray, where there was concerns about corridors and stuff when we were doing our official plan. They just want the time to have more input. And I think that's something that this allows. And again, currently it still allows the current status still allows shops to move forward. It's not changing. It's looking at the smaller sizes. That's a little bit of the debate here and some of that thing. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Warden.
Thank you. I do not see other hands. Is it time to call the question? Okay. All those in favor of the motion? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Okay, so we are now on to the main motion with respect to OPA 11. So OPA 11 as amended by the motion that just passed. So folks, if I could get your attention. So we're now voting on OPA 11 with the on-farm diversified uses, those clauses with respect to that removed. Are we clear about that? Okay. Madam Clerk, I will turn it over to you. Just one, go ahead.
Very brief. I want to just take this opportunity to thank staff for all the hard work that you have done. There's a lot of great stuff that's in OP 11, and you worked through a lot of the public consultation on that. So I think it's worth noting that there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of hard work that was done to bring this forward to today.
Also,
Sorry, go. What, you'll have to turn your microphone on.
Also to be noted, it was not Scott's fault that lunch got delayed.
Councillor Mackey,
In favor?
Councillor Mackey is in favor. Councillor Gamble. Councillor Gamble is in favor. Councillor Burley.
favor.
Councillor Burley is in favor. Councillor Carlton.
In favor.
Councillor Carlton is in favor. Councillor McQueen. Councillor McQueen is in favor. Councillor Desai.
In favor.
Councillor Desai is in favor. Councillor Patterson.
In favor.
Councillor Patterson is in favor. Warden Hicks.
Yay.
Warden Hicks is in favor. Councillor Clumpus.
In favor.
Councillor Clumpus is in favor. Councillor Keaveney.
In favor.
Councillor Keaveney is in favor. Councillor Body. Councillor Body is in favor. Councillor O'Leary.
In favor.
Councillor O'Leary is in favor. Councillor Woodbury.
Favor.
Councillor Woodbury is in favor. Councillor Milne.
In favor.
Councillor Milne is in favor. Councillor Soever.
In favor.
Councillor Soever is in favor. Councillor Bourdignon.
In favor.
Councillor Bourdignon is in favor. Councillor Robinson.
Opposed.
Councillor Robinson is opposed. Councillor Hutchinson.
Opposed.
Councillor Hutchinson is opposed. That motion carries 79 to 11.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, we are now going to deal with the second bylaw that was in our package. Believe it or not, there is another one. It's 5146-22. That's the municipal access agreement. I need a mover to put the item on the floor. So moved by Councillor Milne, seconded by Councillor Robinson. And who is? I guess we're gonna, this is very straightforward. We're gonna call the vote unless you have discussion here. So all those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Thank you very much. We're now on to item number 11, good news and celebrations. Councillor Desai.
Good news.
We finally got through the council agenda. It's worthy of celebration. And we have.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Councillor Body.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. I want to thank Anne Marie Shaw and the committee that put together this building for putting these windows in here that were clearly put there for today. And look out those windows and look at all the beautiful scenic colors out there. It's pretty darn amazing that we live here. And hopefully all those people that don't live here get to come and visit and see it and see what we see every day. Thanks.
And thanks to Rob for giving the public a shot through the window. Nice work, Rob. Councillor Burley.
Thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Body. I just want to point out, kind of, Councillor, you're actually looking directly at George and Bluff.
Okay. I think we're all a little bit giddy now that we've gotten through OPA 11, right? Councillor Soever.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. I'd like to report that the Thornbury Clarksburg Rotary had their Thornbury Turkey Trot, which is a series of races which extend from 21 kilometers to 10 kilometers to 5 kilometers. And there was a 1 kilometer kids fun run. This is a fundraiser for the Rotary, and they were fully subscribed. They had 500 runners out on Saturday, so it was a great event. On some sad news, Councillor Jim Urim passed away on Sunday. He's the second member of our council to pass away this term, and Jim had been battling courageously with illness for a while, and so it's a very sad occasion. It's not good news, but nonetheless, I thought I'd let you guys know. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Soever. I do not see any other hands. So with that said, I'll move for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Burley, seconded by Deputy Warden McQueen. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. We'll switch right over. Oh, my apologies. I did not allow you. She even reminded me. Is it appropriate? I mean,
I'll just very quickly.
Yeah.
No trouble. Two things, Council, I just wanted to bring to your attention. First of all, Saturday from 9:30 to 11:30 in the morning is the community tree planting to celebrate climate action. And that's some of the work that you see happening out at the front of the building here where we get ready. And we just wanted everybody to be aware that everyone is welcome. Neighborhoods North is going to be there. We're going to have a few minutes to talk about stewardship, and our Indigenous partners will be there as well. And so I think it's going to be a lovely morning, and if anybody can come and participate or observe. The other piece that I wanted to remind you of is November 4th and the Warden's Gala in celebration of the United Way, or in support of the United Way. This is a fundraiser for them, and I think we've got a great night lined up, a lovely dinner, lovely musical entertainment, and a really interesting keynote speaker, Mike Shorman, that's joining us that night. is the first person with a physical disability to paddleboard across all of the Great Lakes. And he's got a wonderful story to tell. So Shipyard Kitchen Party for music and Mike to talk. I think it'll be a great night, and I hope everybody's welcome to buy a ticket and to come. So I hope we see lots of you there. Thanks.
Excellent. So mark your calendars, November 4th for the Warden's banquet / fundraiser. And come out Saturday, take a break from the campaign and come plant some trees. All right, so we are going to turn. All right, we're going to turn over now to, oh, am I ready? Good to go? I am, thank you. We're now meeting as Committee of the Whole. It's October 13th. I call this meeting to order. Is there any declaration of interest, pecuniary or otherwise? Seeing none, we'll proceed, and I would just say you will declare it if one comes up during the course of the meeting. There's no business arising, and we have no delegations. We're on to item 5, determination of items requiring separate discussion. So taking a peek at the consent agenda, is there anything that needs to be pulled? Then I'm looking for a motion to adopt the consent agenda, moved by Councillor Woodbury, seconded by Councillor Body. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you. That takes me all the way down now to item number 7. 7A is the Grey Roots operating plan update. I guess that puts Savannah or no. Okay, Jill on deck. I need a mover to put the item on the floor. So moved by Councillor O'Leary and Councillor Bordignon. You had your hand up the last time. Do you want to put your no? Okay, give me a second by Councillor Robinson. Jill, you have the floor.
Thank you, Warden. Thank you, Warden and Grey County Council. This Grey Roots operating plan update serves as a progress report on actions and priorities outlined in the Grey Roots operating plan that was endorsed by Council in March of 2022. This report provides examples of initiatives and actions taken in the last 6 months as per the plan, along with an overview of the first normal summer season post-pandemic. Grey Roots continues to focus on collaboration, accessibility, sustainability, and evaluation as strategic goals. The following items provide examples of initiatives and actions taken in the last 6 months in support of these goals. So next slide. So the first goal I'd like to just elaborate on is collaboration. We created an art piece in partnership with Niall Johnson, artist from Chippewa, Nawash, unceded First Nation. The 7 art pieces depict Anishinaabe creation stories while pointing towards reconciliation and understanding of the treaty process in Grey County. And the piece is called Soaking Anishinaabe King Presents Our Stories. We've been successful in meeting with the Indigenous Advisory Circle in April and August of this year. The circle is made up of 7 members from the local Anishinaabe community who have an interest and background in education, history, and culture. And they've already provided valuable feedback on a number of projects. The Grey County Community Cultural Initiative Fund was launched in March and supports the partnerships and collaborations that create new opportunities to raise awareness of Grey County's diverse cultural history. We send our congratulations to the organizations and individuals who were selected as recipients for the inaugural funding period of 2022, and we look forward to following these projects as they take shape. Council may also be interested to hear about Black history events and projects that took place over the summer and are underway. Grey Roots and Grey County planning staff have been working together to create a story map that will highlight locations of significance for Grey County's Black history. In future phases, the community will be able to suggest points of significance to add to the map. Grey Roots was honored to host the the Grey County Black Heritage Society's commemorative event in advance of the federal government's formal apology to the Black soldiers of the No. 2 Construction Battalion. And celebrating its 160th year, the Emancipation Festival held its Speakers Corner and gospel events at Grey Roots this July, August. We were also pleased to hold our first in-person volunteer recognition event this past May and to develop a joint exhibition with the Durham Art Gallery to celebrate Durham's 150th. The next goal is accessibility. In an effort to create greater access to the museum, Grey Roots has offered several pay-by-donation days. These days not only benefit the community, but also give staff the opportunity to observe the difference in revenue and attendance, and early results have been positive. Welcoming Week is a global initiative that encourages individuals and communities to spread the message of inclusion in collaboration with colleagues at the Grey Bruce Local Immigration Partnership and Grey Transit Route. The museum offered a pay-by-donation day and free bus ride to and from the museum on September 10th. A different kind of accessibility is the work we're doing through the Grey County the Grey County Gallery redesign. So accessibility is one area that will be immediately improved by the new design of the exhibits in the Grey County Gallery. Current standards for accessibility have directly influenced the placement, color, and size of the text and graphics to ensure the information presented meets those standards. The redesign will also increase the number of artifacts accessible to the public from 27 to 101 in just that section alone. And then the next goal is sustainability. So with the support of council, registration fees for Kids Camp were raised in 2022. Staff did not receive any feedback on the fee and successfully completed the first camp season in 2 years, welcoming 138, nearly filling all the spots, all 140 spots. So the children were in the museum over the course of 8 weeks this summer. Oops, sorry. In July, Grey Roots was pleased to officially launch Zuz's Place, our beautiful children's gallery sponsored by Fairmont Security Services. The generous $20,000 sponsorship is specifically earmarked for the development and implementation of the children's gallery. And to account for the heightened visitor experience during July and August, while Morriston Heritage Village is open to the public and animated with volunteers and costumed interpreters and summer students, Grey Roots raised the price of the museum admission by $250 across all categories. And our last strategic goal is evaluation. From June to September and ongoing, Grey Roots surveyed visitors in person and online and received 82 responses. Respondents to questions about events wanted to see family and kid targeted events, more interactive and hands-on displays, more Indigenous representation, food-focused events, and music in the village, and more outdoors. There were a wide variety of suggestions for traveling exhibits, but if we break them down into categories, the most requested were science, animals, and local history. In response to questions about Morrison's Heritage Village, we received requests for more opening hours for the buildings with interpreters, a place to buy snacks and water, more interactive or hands-on elements, and a paved path to improve accessibility. And suggestions for more buildings, including a church or a tavern. And there were quite a few expressions of interest about the general store, which was great to see. At the end of the season, we also surveyed our volunteers and revealed that all respondents felt safe coming back to work in a regular operating year, and every respondent intended to come back in 2023, and more than 70% were interested in serving a shift or two in the general store. We also took a look at our performance measures. This summer season is the first for Grey Roots since 2019, considering the absence of international travel and coach tours, ongoing public health concerns, and further indicators such as rising inflation. Staff are content by the return visitation and performance measures. Though we have not returned to pre-pandemic numbers, perhaps the most inspiring is the fact that these numbers represent local tourism, which continues to be encouraged through the Economic Development, Tourism, and Culture Department. I can also report that through an informal survey of colleagues in the museum field, we're feeling a similar trend across all museums. Looking ahead, staff are excited for residents and visitors to explore our new interactive traveling exhibit, Leonardo da Vinci Machines in Motion, and the return of special events, including Morrison by Candlelight, the first in-person archives lecture series since 2019, and the first in-person meeting of the Grey Bruce Dufferin Museum Network. Also, over the past 6 months, staff have successfully acted on each of the goals, bringing the operation plan to life. The important work has emphasized community building, enhancing the visitor experience, and positively impacted Grey Roots now and into the future. And I want to just take a moment to acknowledge the dedication and talent of the Grey Roots staff and the unwavering support of all our volunteers. It takes a village to run the village and the museum. And on behalf of Savannah and I, we wanted to express our thanks for their amazing work. Thank you for your time and consideration of this report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much for that report, Jill. And I will just say, if I'm coloring it my way, Black County has an awesome museum. I was listening. Council, are there any questions? Wonderful. You'll stay on deck. We're going to vote. We're going to vote on this, and then we'll be doing the next report as well. So all those in favor? Are there any opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Thank you very much. And we will deal with the last item of the day, which is the criteria for National Historic Site designation. That puts you, Jill, on deck as well. I need a mover to put the item on the floor. So moved by Councillor Soever, seconded by Councillor Carlton. Jill?
There we go. Thank you, Warden and Grey County Council. During the April 14th, 2022 council meeting, correspondence was received from the municipality of Grey Highlands regarding an application to the Historic Sites and Monument Board of Canada for Old Durham Road Black Pioneer Cemetery to be declared a National Historic Site. Out of that discussion, council asked that a staff report be brought forward outlining criteria to substantiate an application for National Historic Site designation, and that a list be brought forward with potential sites. As a first step in the progress, staff consulted with the Heritage Designations and Programs Branch of Parks Canada to understand the criteria and process required for designation presented through this report. To paraphrase the criteria and guidelines, which you can see in greater detail in the report, any aspect of Canada's human history may be considered for National Historic Site significance. To be considered for designation, a place, a person, or an event will have had a nationally significant impact on Canadian history or will illustrate a nationally important aspect of Canadian human history. When the proposal relates to a place or an area such as a site in Grey County, there are additional requirements, including the written consent of the property owner and clear boundaries of the area proposed for designation. If a place belongs to a large number of owners or falls under a municipal authority, consent may take the form of a municipal resolution supporting the area to be nominated for national designation. We've provided a list of some of the current sites with federal heritage designations, such as Billy Bishop's boyhood home in Owen Sound, Agnes McPhail as a National Historic Person commemorated in Grey Highlands, and Nellie McClung in Chatsworth. In terms of potential new designations, in order to create a comprehensive list, community consultation will be required, in addition to consultation with individuals and landowners to determine preliminary interest, especially given most nominations cannot be submitted without prior written consent. Though Grey County and Grey Roots are not precluded from nominating individuals, places, or events, the process is typically initiated at the grassroots level and supported by our roles. Staff will include a research project in the work plan when resources allow to develop a comprehensive list through consultation should council wish to further consider this information. I'm happy to open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Jill. You must be recognizing that we are wanting to, but no, this is important stuff. Councillor Desai.
Thank you very much, Warden Hicks. I would like to point out to the member opposite that Agnes McPhail is listed as being from Grey Highlands. I'm sure someday the honourable member opposite will be on a similar list for his contributions to the booming metropolis of Drumore. But until then, for the record, Agnes McPhail is from Grey Highlands. Thank you.
Thank you for making that point. And I did point out she visited Hanover, right? Frequently, yes. Any other questions? Deputy Warden?
On a other note, just regards to our Indigenous community in Grey County and stuff, have they been reached out to, or is there any particular areas within, what they may have or know of?
Gosh, apologies. They haven't been consulted for the purpose of this report, but I do know there is a National Historic Site designation for Nabibimiquai, or Catherine Sutton, although the location has not been determined yet. I think it's in need of more consultation with community. Yeah, that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for this, Jill. I'll call the question. All those in favor of receiving the report? Anyone opposed? That is carried. We're on to item number, we do not need a closed meeting. We have no closed meeting matters. Is there any other business? Councillor Milne.
Cows are in the pasture. Just one point, Mr. Warden, I inadvertently did not declare pecuniary interest in an item for last meeting's committee of the whole. It was item 133-22, item C, regarding a red line revision of a subdivision in Southgate. I have pecuniary interest with that particular subdivision as the developer is a family member. So I will follow up with the clerk following this meeting.
Thank you very much for raising that. Is there any other business? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by, oh boy, they're quick. Councillor O'Leary, seconded by Councillor Woodbury. Oh, I'm sorry. That wasn't to adjourn? Sorry? Oh, my apologies. Okay. Go right ahead, sir.
Yes, like to bring a notice of motion. In May 2021, County Council passed bylaw 5112-21, a bylaw to provide for the cancellation of tax increases for the purposes of relieving financial hardship for low-income seniors and low-income persons with disabilities. Recently, I became aware that many seniors were unaware of this program. The bylaw states that all applications made under this bylaw shall be made to the treasurer of the local municipality in which the eligible property is located in a form as set out by the local treasurer. So on October 3rd, I sent an email to all local treasurers asking them to direct me to the form for their municipality and advise if they had any uptake of this program. Only Southgate, Grey Highlands, and Blue Mountains replied. In 2021, Southgate had 3 applications, totaling $123.31 in tax relief. They hadn't received any applications to date in 2022. Grey Highlands had processed 1 application in 2021, and the Blue Mountains had no applications, but the program was not posted on our website until recently. None of the other municipalities replied, so I did go and check the websites of the other lower tier municipalities and could not find any mention of this program or the requisite forms. It appears the 2-tier system where the county sets tax policy and the lower tier is tasked with implementing it has let our seniors down. So I will be bringing a motion at the next meeting to ask council to direct county staff to advertise and otherwise communicate that this program is available so that low-income seniors and low-income persons with disabilities can become aware of this program, and also that they assist the lower tiers so that that do not have the necessary forms And maybe the county staff could provide them with the forms so that they can meet their responsibilities under this bylaw. So I'll be bringing that next time.
I don't want to discourage your suggestion for a motion, but could it not be that staff simply take that under advisement and act on it? We do that all the time, do we not?
Well,
Council as a whole directs staff. You know, I think just coming in to tell staff, you know, if everybody did that, everybody'd have their pet project. And so I just believe it's good for them to bring the motion.
Okay, I'll let you work with the clerk on that. Are there any other notices of motion? Seeing none, then I will return to our motion to adjourn. That's moved by Councillor Leary, seconded by Councillor Woodbury, that we adjourn. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much, folks.